The oven timer dinged just as Lindsay leaned in and said, "Chew slower, Art. Your dentures don't have Wi-Fi." The room went quiet, except for the hiss of the turkey pan. I swallowed hard, not because of the meat, but because my son, Evan, didn't look up. He just stared at his wineglass like it held the courage he couldn't find. Her parents laughed, those polite chuckles people give when cruelty hides behind humor. I sat there nodding, pretending I hadn't heard. That's what I do best, pretend. But I felt something inside me crack, the same way old pipes groan before they burst. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from. This story isn't about revenge for an insult. It's about what happens when the person who mocks you forgets who owns the floor beneath her heels. Thanksgiving night, Westwood, Cincinnati. The table gleamed, store-bought centerpieces and candles that smelled too much like department stores. I noticed the small things. The new handbag with the gold chain, a Duke Energy bill for $418 folded under a magnet, an unopened $200 catering invoice peeking from the counter. I've always been a man who reads what others try to hide. When Evelyn, my late wife, was alive, she'd say, "Art, you don't eavesdrop, you observe." That skill saved us more than once. Lindsay poured herself another glass of Cabernet. She bragged about her rough tenants, how she'd break her landlord before Christmas. I laughed quietly, because I knew exactly which landlord she was talking about. The ghost who never showed his face. The one she'd been paying rent to, or rather not paying, for 3 straight months. Me, Evan, leaned in, voice low. "Dad, can we talk later?" "It's about a card bill. Just a small favor." "Small, my foot." He'd said the same last spring before asking for $5,000 to clear a balance. I told him we'd talk tomorrow. But tomorrow, I already knew, was the day I'd stop being everyone's backup wallet. When I left their house that night, the wind had a bitter edge. I stood by my old pickup, watching their lights glow through the frosted windows. Inside, laughter rose again, not warm laughter, but the kind that echoes off walls. "You'll never call home again." I pressed record on my phone and whispered, "Thanksgiving, November 24th. Lindsay Malloy mocked me at her table." Evan stayed silent. "I believe they're talking about the triplex. Rent unpaid since September. Proof to follow." My voice shook, but not from sadness. It was the tremor of something older, colder, resolve. I drove back to my empty house, parked by the maple that Evelyn planted 30 years ago, and sat there until the engine cooled. Then I opened her old blue ledger, the one labeled Maple and Pine Holdings, LLC. I wrote a single line, "They think the landlord is a ghost. Let's remind them what ghosts can do." Morning came heavy. The house was still, the kind of still that presses on your chest. Evelyn's piano sat by the window, a thin film of dust softening its shine. It hadn't been played since she passed that February, but I still kept it tuned, like I was keeping her memory in key. I made coffee that tasted like burnt paper, sat at the table, and stared at the ledger I'd opened the night before. Her handwriting curled through the pages, rent logs, maintenance notes, tenant contacts. Even gone, she kept the business running cleaner than I ever could. I flipped to the most recent page, Unit 2B, Lindsay and Evan Malloy, Sept Oct Novi, 7,350 owed. 3 neat red X's next to rent received. My chest tightened. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the betrayal, the arrogance of pretending the roof over her head was just another freebie from her husband's aging father. My phone buzzed with a new message. A group chat photo, Lindsay raising a wineglass, captioned, "Cheers to landlords learning respect." Evan had liked it. The laughter from last night echoed in my head, and this time it hit bone deep. I put the mug down before I threw it. The voice in me that used to whisper, "Let it go, Art," had gone quiet since Evelyn's death. Now there was another one, calmer, older, sharper. It said, "Write everything down," so I did. I wrote the date, Friday, November 25th. Then, visit Maple Street, confirm noise complaints, document tenant violations. It gave me a reason to move, a reason not to rot in grief. When I reached the triplex, the air smelled of cold rain and damp leaves. Unit 2B's blinds were half open, and a stranger was wheeling in a silver carry-on suitcase. I took a photo from my truck, license plate visible. Then I called Avery, my property manager, the only person who knew I owned the building through my LLC. She answered on the first ring. "Art, I was just about to call you. You need to see this." Inside her office, she laid out a stack of papers, tenant ledgers, HOA letters, complaint slips, 14 separate noise and parking complaints, 2 HOA fines, $300 each, 3 months rent delinquent, and a printout of an online listing, a cozy Westwood apartment on Airbnb, unmistakably 2B, down to the floral backsplash Evelyn had picked herself. My stomach turned. "Your tenant thinks her landlord's a ghost," Avery said, folding her hands. I nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time the ghost spoke. Back home, I replayed a voicemail Avery had forwarded. It was Lindsay's voice, venom behind the honey. "Whoever this landlord is, he's a coward. He hides behind paper. I'll ruin him before Christmas." The timestamp read Thursday, 11:38 p.m. I wrote every word on a yellow pad and slipped it into my red folder. For a while, I just sat there, staring at Evelyn's framed photo above the fireplace. She used to say boundaries keep love honest. Maybe I'd forgotten that. Maybe in trying to be the nice dad, I'd turned into the fool who funded his own humiliation. That night, I didn't sleep. I made lists, dates, amounts, names, Avery for property, Flint for legal, Ruth for witness statement. I mapped out everything Lindsay thought I didn't see, the lies, the debts, the smug grin she wore while sitting in my chair under my roof. Around 3 a.m., I drove to the triplex again. The hall light was on. Through the thin wood of 2B's door, I heard laughter. Not Lindsay's, but strangers, tourists. She'd turned my wife's carefully managed property into a revolving door for quick cash. I stood there a minute, gripping the doorknob until my hand ached. Then I whispered, "Enjoy it while it lasts." When I got home, the city was still dark. The streetlights glowed against the frost on my truck hood. I sat on the porch steps with the red folder and wrote one more line before dawn cracked through the blinds. Tomorrow, the ghost files the papers. Saturday morning, November 26th. The frost on the truck windshield looked like veins, spreading, branching, alive. I let the engine idle while I stared at the condensation on the steering wheel. If I was going to do this, it couldn't be out of anger. Evelyn always said, "Anger burns quick. Truth burns clean." So I promised myself, no shouting, no tricks, just proof. Paper and patience. I drove to Honeysuckle Cafe downtown, the kind of place that serves coffee too fancy for men like me. Avery was already there, hair tied back, her laptop glowing over a folder full of color-coded tabs. She smiled when she saw the red accordion folder in my hand. "You're serious now," she said. I nodded. "It's time." We spread the paperwork between our coffee mugs like a war map. The 3-day notice to pay or vacate was first. Avery filled in the total, $7,350 rent owed, plus the $600 in HOA fines. Then she stapled a photo sheet showing the Airbnb listing. Charming Westwood 2B apartment with 2 strangers grinning in front of my late wife's curtains. Under the picture, the description read, "Modern vibe, old town charm, hosted by Lindsay." I underlined that last part twice. "You sure you want to go the legal way?" Avery asked. "You could just talk to her." "Talk?" I scoffed. She mocked me at her table. "There's no talking left." She nodded once and slid the notice toward me. "Then sign here and keep every copy. We'll serve it today, certified mail and in person." When the pen touched paper, I felt the same stillness I'd felt signing Evelyn's hospice papers, the silence right before life changes course. At noon, Avery and I drove to Maple Street. She handed the folded 3-day notice to a courier, who tucked it neatly into a bright yellow envelope. I watched through the truck mirror as he placed it on Lindsay's door, snapped a proof photo, and walked away. It was almost too easy. Later that afternoon, we stopped by the unit for an inspection under the LLC's rights. I took photos, scuffed baseboards, a cracked bathroom tile, wine stains spreading into the bedroom carpet like old bruises. Avery crouched near the hall closet and held up a silver key labeled "Guest." "Guess your ghost gave someone a spare," she said. I took it from her and slipped it into a plastic bag. "Evidence," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. At 3:00 p.m., Avery emailed me a copy of the HOA's new warning. I saved it as a PDF, printed it, and slid it behind the lease in my folder. Every paper had its place. That evening, I sat in my truck outside Flint & Howell Law, watching the rain stripe down the windshield while I waited for my attorney to finish another case. When he called me in, I laid out the folder like evidence for trial. Flint read in silence, nodding, eyebrows lifting only once. "Well," he said finally, "you've got her 6 ways from Sunday. Just don't touch the locks yourself. File the forcible entry and detainer motion next week. Ohio law'll be on your side." "I don't want to humiliate her," I said. "I just want it documented." He smiled faintly. "That's the best revenge there is." Back home, I added 2 new pages to my ledger: legal steps and costs. I wrote, "Filing fee, $135, court date, estimate Jan 3. Then, almost as an afterthought, I texted Evan, "You and Lindsay should come to my place Christmas Eve. Quiet dinner. Simple." He replied with a thumbs-up emoji, nothing more. By midnight, I had the entire operation mapped like a blueprint. Proof, witnesses, and time. Ruth, my next-door neighbor, a retired court clerk, agreed to notarize a witness statement about the strangers coming and going from 2B. She signed it under the glow of her porch light, December wind cutting across her lawn. "Arthur," she said softly, "you're doing it right. Paper over anger. That's how men win now." I nodded, tucking her affidavit behind the inspection photos. When I got home, the house felt lighter somehow. For the first time in months, I slept. And as I drifted off, I dreamed of Evelyn, smiling, her hands resting on that old piano, whispering, "Boundaries art. Boundaries are love's backbone." I woke at dawn, with that word echoing in my chest. By the end of the week, Lindsay would learn exactly what boundaries felt like. From November 27th to December 2nd, I stopped being Dad. I became something sharper, a record keeper, a quiet storm with a paper trail. Monday morning I went to the courthouse. The air in the Hamilton County Clerk's office smelled like dust and toner. I waited in line behind a woman arguing about parking tickets while clutching my red folder like it was a lifeline. When my turn came, I slid the forcible entry and detainer form across the counter. The clerk scanned it, then stamped it with the dull thud that sounded like justice starting its engine. "Filing fee, $135. She handed me the stamped copy and said, "Court date likely in early January. You'll get notice." "Perfect," I said. My voice didn't tremble, not once. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and labeled everything, Exhibit A through F. A, lease signed by Lindsay Malloy, dated March 4th. B, rent ledger, arrears of $7 to $350. C, HOA letters, OKT 3 and NOV 14. D, Airbnb screenshots. E, noise complaints. F, witness statement notarized by Ruth Delgado. It was surgical, deliberate. I almost enjoyed it. The clarity of purpose, the order in the chaos. By Tuesday, the ripples started. Lindsay must have received the notice because her social media lit up like fireworks. A post on Facebook read, "Imagine being bullied by a faceless landlord during the holidays. Some people have no soul." Evan liked it with a heart emoji. My son, my blood, siding with her echo chamber. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed it and tucked it behind the affidavit. Every word she typed became another brick in the wall she was building around herself. A wall I intended to let collapse naturally. On Wednesday, I drove to the triplex for a quiet inspection. Avery met me at the door with her camera. We documented everything: the stained carpet, the missing smoke detector, the scuff marks around the door frame. But what stopped us cold was the whiteboard hanging in the hallway. It read in big block letters, "Turnover days, choose plus Fry, cleaning crew 10 a.m. She was running a full-fledged short-term rental business out of my unit. Avery snapped a picture. Guess she's not worried about privacy laws, she said. I smiled thinly. That'll look great in court. When we left, I locked eyes with one of the strangers dragging out a suitcase. He gave me a polite nod, assuming I was maintenance. In a way, I was. Maintenance of truth, maintenance of boundaries. On Thursday, I gathered all the proof into a binder, not just the red folder. A full narrative, ready for the judge. Evelyn would have been proud. She loved neat rows, clear columns, clean math. Every page told a story. They owed, they lied, they mocked, they fell. Late that evening, my phone buzzed. Evan. Dad, you filed something? Lindsay got some notice. What's going on? I took a breath. She's behind on rent, Evan. It's business, not personal. He scoffed. Business? She's your family? No, I said quietly. She's my tenant. Silence, then a cold. You've changed since Mom died. I had to, I said. Somebody had to survive. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in that silence for a long time, but underneath the ache there was calm, the peace of finally defending myself. Friday came with sleet and grey skies. Avery called to confirm the court docket date, January 3rd at 9 a.m. We had everything filed, served, and stamped. Now all that remained was time, and a stage, because the showdown wouldn't be in a courtroom alone. I'd already set another stage. That night I drafted invitations for Christmas Eve dinner. Just me, Evan, and Lindsay. I worded it carefully. Simple dinner, just us, no guests, no stress. Evan replied, Sure thing, Dad. Appreciate it. Lindsay sent a thumbs-up emoji. When I sealed the envelope, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Tired, older, but steady. The kind of man who's done being humiliated. Before bed, I placed the red folder on the piano. Its edges glowed faintly under the lamp's amber light, like it was burning from within. Evelyn's reflection in the photo above it seemed to smile. The ghost, it seemed, was learning how to haunt the living again. With truth, not fear. The first snow came on December 10th, thin and wet, melting the moment it hit the ground. By then, the tension had started to thicken, in the air, in my chest, even in the walls of my house. Each morning, I'd wake to a new notification. Another post. Another jab. Lindsay had turned her self-pity into performance art. See you in court, Casper, one of her captions read, paired with a smirking selfie and a mug of hot cocoa. She thought it was clever, mocking the landlord she didn't know was sitting 2 miles away, screenshotting every single word. I didn't comment, didn't even block her. I just archived it all. Dates, URLs, printouts. Paper never forgets. On December 12th, I got an email from Avery. Attached was another noise complaint from the HOA, loud music at 1:14 a.m., guests leaving trash in the common hall. The HOA had copied the property management line. Violation number 15, possible short-term rental activity. That email went straight into the red folder. By the next week, even Evan was jumpy. He called on the 16th, voice tight. Dad, can you please just call off this court thing? Lindsay's embarrassed. The neighbors are gossiping. I didn't start the gossip, I said. She did when she listed the place online. Come on, he sighed. It's the holidays. Can't you just give us a break? I kept my voice calm. Evan, this isn't about holidays. It's about respect. She owes me $7,350, and I want her out before she owes $8. He groaned, muttered something about cold-hearted old men, and hung up. I didn't chase him. That night, I took out Evelyn's Christmas box, the one with the ornaments she'd collected over 40 years. Each one had a tag in her handwriting. I hung 3 of them, a small red heart, a silver bell, and a piano-shaped charm, on the tree beside the piano. It wasn't about decorating. It was about remembering who I was doing this for. The next morning, December 17th, Avery called. HOA's final warning came in. They'll start fining her $200 a day starting January 1st. Perfect timing, I said. You sound calm, she replied. Calm's the sharpest edge I've got left. A few days later, Evan stopped by the garage. He looked rough, unshaven, eyes sunken. I just need the spare garage key, he said. Lindsay's December 24th, Christmas Eve, the day the story folded back on itself. By late afternoon, my house smelled of roasted carrots, thyme, and slow-cooked prime rib, the same dinner Evelyn used to make every Christmas Eve before cancer took her. It wasn't just food, it was theater. Every plate, every candle, every fork placement was a stage light, and my audience, Evan and Lindsay, would arrive soon. I ironed a white shirt, tucked it neatly, and set the dining table for 3. The red folder sat at the far end, disguised under a stack of placemats. Outside, the snow had turned steady, tapping softly against the windows. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt ready. At 5:30, sharp tires crunched on the driveway. Evan walked in first, forcing a smile. Lindsay followed, draped in sequins, perfume thick enough to hide nerves. "Merry Christmas, Dad," Evan said, setting down a bottle of wine. "Merry Christmas," I replied, shaking his hand. Lindsay handed me a small box. "For you," she said sweetly. Inside was a cheap leather wallet, the kind you buy last minute at a pharmacy. "It's practical," she added, flashing a perfect smile. I nodded. "Practical's good." She looked around the house. "Still the same decor. Kind of vintage." "Evelyn liked it that way," I said. She shrugged. "Well, everyone's got their style." Dinner began slow, clinking cutlery, small talk about weather and real estate. Evan asked if I'd seen the news. Lindsay interrupted to talk about a new listing she was closing. It was textbook deflection, the same kind she'd use when Avery called about overdue rent. I let her talk. The longer she felt comfortable, the sharper the drop would be. Halfway through the meal, she brought up landlords again. "You know, it's disgusting how greedy some of them are," she said, slicing her meat. "They hide behind LLCs, treat families like numbers. If I ever met mine, I'd give him a piece of my mind." Evan coughed lightly, shooting me a glance, maybe warning, maybe guilt. I smiled and refilled her glass. "Well, some ghosts like listening," I said softly. She laughed, unaware of the trap snapping shut around her. "So what's your plan for the new year, Art?" she asked. "Still managing that mystery property you mentioned years ago." I took a slow sip of water. "You could say that. In fact, I'm making a few changes." "Good," she said, raising her glass. "New year, new beginnings." Under the table, my hand brushed the red folder. I slid it closer to my chair, its edge just visible under the tablecloth. I'd rehearsed this in my head 100 times, but now, with the piano glinting behind them and Evelyn's ornament catching the candlelight, it felt divine. When dessert came, apple pie from Findlay Market, Evelyn's favorite, I set 2 small boxes beside their plates. They looked identical to the one Lindsay had given me. She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't have to, Art." "I wanted to," I said. "It's tradition, giving people what they've earned." She smirked and opened hers first. Inside lay a photocopy of her lease, stamped with her signature and a printed screenshot of her Airbnb listing. Her smile froze. Evan's hand paused mid-air. "What is this?" she asked. "Proof," I said quietly, "of who you've been pretending not to know." Evan looked from her to me, color draining. "Dad," I leaned back, calm as snow. "I've been patient. 3 months of unpaid rent, 14 HOA complaints, 6 strangers with suitcases, and a listing that used my wife's home as a hotel. You said you'd break your landlord before Christmas." I gestured toward the piano. "It's Christmas Eve, Lindsay. How's that working out?" She laughed nervously, reaching for Evan's arm. "You're serious? You're our landlord?" "I am," I said, "through Maple and Pine Holdings. The ghost behind the lease." Her fork clattered onto the plate. "You can't evict family," she said. "I can evict tenants," I replied. "Family doesn't mock me at dinner." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, cutting through years of politeness and cowardice. Lindsay blinked fast, tears gathering but not falling. Evan looked shattered, caught between guilt and disbelief. Then I said it calm as law. You have two choices, Lindsay. Settle your debt by December 31st. $7,150 rent, $600 HOA, $1,880 in damages, and sign a move-out agreement by January 31st, or we continue with the January 3rd court date. She pushed back from the table, her voice shaking. You wouldn't. I already did, I said, and that was the truth. The ghost had spoken, and the storm outside was only beginning. The room went still, like the air itself stopped breathing. Evan's fork hovered above the plate, trembling. Lindsay's face drained of color, the same flawless face that smirked at me during Thanksgiving dinner. Only now it looked human, afraid. You filed what? She asked, voice thin, cracking between words. An eviction, I said plainly. Filed December 2nd, Hamilton County Municipal Court. Case numbers on the notice you signed for. She shook her head hard, as if denial could rewrite documents. That couldn't have been. It was, I interrupted, my tone steady as law. 3 months of non-payment, an illegal sublet, and 14 neighbor complaints. You wanted to break your landlord? Congratulations. You finally met him. Her chair screeched against the floor as she stood. Evan reached for her arm, whispering, "Sit down, Lynn." "No," she snapped. "You can't just humiliate us like this." "I didn't," I said, leaning forward. "You did that yourselves. I just wrote it down." I opened the red folder and began sliding documents onto the table one by one. Each page landed like a verdict. The lease agreement with her signature. The rent ledger showing 73 and 50 due. 2 HOA letters dated Oct. 3 and Nov. 14, signed by the association president. Photos of strangers in 2B. One holding a wine bottle with the caption, "Our Cincinnati B&B host rocks." Avery's inspection report, time-stamped. Ruth's notarized affidavit, neatly folded behind it. Lindsay stared at the pile like it was a crime scene. And in a way, it was. Her own. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because I've spent a year being the butt of your jokes," I said quietly. "Because Evelyn spent her last days praying this family wouldn't rot after she was gone. And because you thought kindness was weakness." Evan put his face in his hands. "Dad, please." "It's Christmas." "Exactly," I said. "A time for truth." I reached under the folder and pulled out the final piece, a single bank slip from last December. It showed $609.842, the amount I'd used to pay off the triplex mortgage after Evelyn's death. "Her last gift to us. This property was your mother's retirement dream," I said, voice breaking just once. "And you turned it into a hotel for strangers." Lindsay's lip quivered. "We were struggling." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You were spending. I saw the $200 catering invoice, the handbags, the wine tastings, the weekend trips. I don't care about the money, Lindsay. I care about respect. And you burned that down with every lie you posted. For a long time, the only sound was the faint hum of the furnace and the piano clock ticking beside Evelyn's picture." Then Lindsay's tone softened, trembling now. "Art, I didn't mean it to go this far. Please, can we just fix this quietly?" "You had months to fix it quietly," I said. "Now it's public record." Her eyes widened. "Public? You mean people will see it?" "Yes," I said. "Court filings are public. Your name, your debt, your lease. You wanted everyone to know how cruel your landlord was. Now they'll know who he was and who he is." Evan finally spoke, his voice low and desperate. "Dad, please. We can pay part of it, just don't make her lose face." I turned to him. "I raised you to pay your debts, not bury them under excuses. You let her mock me at dinner. You let her live free in my property. And you called me changed because I wouldn't bankroll it. You're right, Evan, I have changed. I started keeping receipts, just like your mother taught me." Lindsay began crying softly, the kind of crying that's more anger than remorse. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own son," she whispered. "I'm doing this for my son," I said. "So he remembers what integrity costs." I pushed the settlement sheet across the table. "2 choices. Pay the full balance, $7,350 rent, $600 fines, $1,180 damages, and sign a move-out agreement by December 31st. I'll withdraw the eviction on payment. or refuse, and we proceed to court January 3rd. Either way, the property will be vacant by January 10th. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks. "You're evil," she hissed. "No," I said, standing. "I'm organized." She stormed toward the door, grabbing her coat. "Come on, Evan, we're leaving." But Evan didn't move. He just sat there, shoulders hunched, staring at the papers spread across the table, the proof of everything. When Lindsay realized he wasn't following, her voice broke. "Evan!" He looked up, eyes wet. "You lied to me, Lynn. You said the landlord was harassing you. You said the rent was paid. It was... He stood abruptly. "No, it wasn't." She froze in the doorway, realizing she'd lost not just the apartment, but her credibility. I walked to the piano, lifted the cover, and pressed a single key, middle C. The note hung in the air, sharp and lonely. "This house has seen lies before," I said quietly. But tonight it heard the truth. Lindsay turned to me, desperate. "Please, Art, don't do this. Don't let people find out." "I didn't ruin your reputation," I said, meeting her eyes. "You posted it yourself." Outside, the snow had thickened. When the door closed behind them, the sound of their car fading down the hill, the house fell silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock beside Evelyn's picture. I poured myself a small glass of bourbon, sat down at the piano bench and whispered, "Merry Christmas." Evie, the ghost, finally came home. 2 days after Christmas. The decorations still hung in my living room, but the house felt different, quieter, not peaceful, just emptied. Like the air after a thunderstorm when everything is clean, but the ground still smells burnt. Lindsay hadn't called that night, but she texted the next morning, "Art, please. We'll get the money. Just give us time. Don't go to court." No apology. No accountability. Just panic. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to Avery and to my attorney, Mr. Flint, then wrote in my ledger, "Deck 26th. Contact acknowledged. No payment made." Evan tried next. "Dad, she's sorry," he said over the phone. "She's sorry she got caught," I replied. "Not sorry she did it." He started to argue, but his voice cracked halfway through. I softened. "Son, I don't hate her. I just won't let her use me. There's a difference." He hung up quietly this time. For the next few days, the silence held. Then came the court date, January 3rd, 9 a.m. The temperature outside hovered around 29 degrees. I wore my only grey suit, the same one from Evelyn's funeral. Avery met me at the courthouse, red folder tucked under her arm. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. Inside the courtroom was small, maybe 20 benches, the walls lined with scuffed oak panels. Tenants and landlords came and went like a revolving door of regret. When our case was called, Lindsay walked in with sunglasses on, though the winter sky outside was grey. Evan followed, eyes down. When she saw me sitting at the plaintiff's table, her face hardened. The judge glanced over the paperwork. Maple and Pine Holdings versus Malloy. Rent arrears, property damage, subletting. Lindsay's voice wobbled as she stood. "Your Honor, we withheld rent because the unit had issues. Leaks, electrical stuff." Avery opened a folder and handed over 3 work orders, each signed off within 48 hours of the complaints. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Looks like all maintenance was completed promptly." Lindsay went silent. Then came the photos, strangers wheeling luggage through the hallway. Airbnb screenshots, the notarized affidavit from Ruth. Every image tightened the noose she'd woven herself. By the time I read the ledger aloud, 3 months unpaid rent, total $73.50, plus $600 HOA fines. The judge didn't need convincing. "Judgment granted for possession," he said, tapping his pen. "Defendant to vacate by January 10th. Monetary damages reserved pending inspection." Evan reached for Lindsay's hand, but she pulled away, staring at the floor. When we stepped into the hallway, she came up to me, voice shaking. "Art, please stop the eviction. I'll pay. I swear I'll pay." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then pay. With proof, not promises." Evan's voice cracked beside her. "She means it, Dad. Just don't make her leave like this." "I gave her every chance before court," I said softly. "Now the law will finish what I started." Outside, the wind bit through my coat. The courthouse steps gleamed with ice. Avery put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it clean, Art. No shouting, no spite." I nodded. That was the point. That evening I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, rereading the judgment order. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was relief. The kind of relief that costs something. My phone buzzed one more time. A message from Lindsay. Please, don't let the bailiff come. I'll move. Just give me a few days. I typed my reply slowly. The bailiff comes January 10th at 9 a.m. Keep it civil, keep it clean. I hit send. Then I slid my phone face down on the table and stared at Evelyn's picture above the piano. Her eyes seemed softer than I remembered. Boundaries, Evie, I whispered. You always said they were just love in a tougher language. By the time January 7th rolled around, the snow had turned crusty and grey, the kind that crunches under your boots and never really melts. I'd spent the past few days getting things in order, a final inspection checklist, a cashier's check ledger, a lock change authorization for Avery. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was housekeeping. Evelyn would have liked that word. On the evening of the 7th, a deposit alert flashed on my phone. $2,000, partial payment from Lindsay's account. No message, no apology, just numbers. I opened my ledger and wrote, partial received. Balance, $7,130 owed. Proceed with set out. Then I printed the confirmation and slid it into the red folder behind the court judgment. Paper over promises, always. January 10th, set out day. The bailiff arrived at 9:03 a.m., tall man in a winter coat, calm, professional. Avery stood by with her clipboard, and the lock-change tech waited on the stairs, toolbox in hand. I didn't bring anger with me, just a thermos of coffee and a quiet heart. Lindsay's silver SUV pulled up at 9:10. She climbed out with two friends and a half-packed U-Haul behind her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice carried that old edge. You didn't have to bring a sheriff, she said. I didn't, I replied. The bailiff's standard procedure. She opened the door to Unit 2B, and I followed her in, not to gloat, but to document. The place smelled faintly of candle wax and cheap perfume. The once white carpet was dotted with wine stains. A chunk of wall plaster had peeled near the radiator. I took photos as Avery read the inventory aloud. Bed frame damaged. Curtain rods missing. Smoke detector removed. Her pen clicked between each word like a metronome. Lindsay stood in the center of the room, trembling. I didn't think it'd end like this, she said quietly. It didn't have to, I replied. But choices always end somewhere. By 3:20 p.m., the U-Haul was loaded. She handed me the keys, still warm from her hand, and whispered, I'll finish paying you. I know, I said. Someday. The bailiff nodded, confirming the set-out was complete. Avery stepped forward, gave the all clear, and the lock tech began his work. The sound of the drill was loud, final, liberating. When the last screw turned, I took the new keys from Avery. We both signed the lock change log, January 10th, 3:47 p.m., possession restored. Case closed. That night, I sat at my desk, red folder open, sorting through the remains of the storm. The judgment, the receipts, the photos, all of it neat and accounted for. Then I wrote one final note in the ledger, justice served. Lesson documented. By January 15th, Avery had already listed the unit online, long-term only, strict lease, no sublets. A nurse named Valerie applied within 2 days. Good credit. Steady income. A single parent who said, I just need someplace quiet. She signed on the 18th. First month's rent, $2,350, cleared before noon. When I handed her the keys, I noticed she paused to touch the doorframe, almost reverently. This place feels peaceful, she said. It is now, I replied. After she left, I locked up and walked next door to Ruth's. She'd baked lemon bars, said it was her way of celebrating paper victories. We sat on her porch, steam rising from our mugs. You look lighter, she said. I am, I told her. Feels like I just cleaned a century's worth of dust off my own name. That weekend, I donated Evelyn's piano to the Vine Street Community Center. They gave me a $3,000 appraisal receipt for tax purposes. But the real return came 2 days later when a teacher called to thank me. She said a teenage girl had played her first hymn on that piano. I hung up and sat in my truck for a long time, eyes burning, whispering, she'd have liked that. Back home, I slid the piano receipt into the ledger and closed it. The red folder, finally empty, went into the drawer. No trophies, just closure. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a door closing with a brand new lock and the quiet that follows when the right person finally walks away. Winter softened after the eviction. Snow melted into slush, the kind that glitters briefly before it turns to grey. The silence in my house wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, like the space finally understood it could breathe again. The triplex on Maple Street felt different too. No shouting, no slammed doors, no strangers dragging suitcases through the hall at midnight. When I stopped by for a maintenance check, glowed Evan called that weekend. Not for money, not for excuses. Just, "Hey Dad, how've you been?" His voice sounded smaller, honest. We met at a diner off Harrison Avenue. No fancy brunch spot this time. Just old coffee and plastic menus. He stirred his cup, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know what to say about Lindsay," he began. "Then don't," I said gently. "Some things don't need speeches," he nodded. I think I was scared to stand up to her. She could twist anything. I didn't respond right away. The truth was, I understood. I'd done the same with life after Evelyn, let grief twist me into silence. After a pause, I told him, "I don't hate her, Evan, but I won't let her drag me down either." He exhaled, eyes wet. "I know, and I'm sorry for not defending you." "Don't apologize," I said. "Just learn." We talked for hours about small things, his job, my garden, the repairs he used to help me with as a kid. Before leaving, he asked quietly, "Do you think we can start over?" I smiled. That's all we ever do in life. Start over. When I got home, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. I took down the Christmas ornaments, the red heart, the silver bell, the piano charm, and placed them back into Evelyn's box. Her handwriting on the tag still looked fresh. "Keep these for good memories only." I sat at the piano bench, just the empty space where her piano used to stand before I donated it. In my mind, I could still hear the soft notes of Silent Night. It wasn't sadness I felt, but peace. Peace built on boundaries. Peace earned, not given. A week later, Ruth stopped by again, holding a casserole and a grin. "Heard your new tenant paid early," she teased. "Some miracles still happen," I said. She laughed, then looked at me with those steady eyes only old friends have. "You did right, Art. Hard right is still right." I nodded, repeating it to myself after she left. Hard right is still right. That night, I updated my ledger one last time. Under Maple and Pine Holdings, I wrote in neat letters, all accounts balanced. All debts closed, all lessons recorded. Then I closed the book and whispered, "Evelyn, it's done." Outside, a slow wind rattled the porch light. Not eerie, just alive. For the first time since she died, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting my own home, because ghosts don't build boundaries. The living de February arrived with a brittle kind of sunlight, weak but honest. The snow on the gutters finally melted, and for the first time in months, I didn't wake up angry. I still checked the mailbox out of habit, still kept the red folder in my drawer, but it was no longer armor. It was just a reminder. Life had found its rhythm again. I spent my mornings volunteering at the Reading Road Legal Aid Clinic, helping other seniors understand leases and tenants' rights. It started as a favor to Avery. They needed someone who could explain paperwork in plain English. But over time, it became something more. I'd sit with older couples who'd been cheated by contractors, widows trying to evict scam tenants, and I'd show them how to document, record, file. Not out of vengeance, out of protection. There's a quiet power in teaching someone that the law can still listen. One grey Tuesday afternoon, I was sorting intake forms when a young counsellor called out, "Art, can you hand me the clipboard for 3 p.m? I reached for the top sheet and froze. Name, Lindsay Malloy. Reason for appointment, roommate dispute, judge's non-payment of shared rent. For a moment I just stared at the paper. It felt like déjà vu wearing new shoes. I took a slow breath, steadied myself, and walked the clipboard over. When she entered a few minutes later, bundled in a thrift store coat, her eyes darted around nervously. She didn't see me at first, not until the counselor said, "Art, can you help us carry these files?" Our eyes met across the room. Her breath caught, and all the color drained from her face. She looked smaller, older, tired in a way that went beyond years. For a second, I thought she might turn and run, but she didn't. "Hi, Art," she said quietly. "Hello, Lindsay," her voice cracked. "I didn't expect you'd be here." "I didn't either," I said. The counselor, not catching the tension, smiled politely. "Oh, you two know each other." Lindsay managed a weak laugh. "You could say that." The counselor excused herself, leaving us alone with a box of files and a silence thick enough to feel. She looked down at her hands. "I'm trying to be better," she whispered. "I really am," I nodded. "I know. I lost the place after Evan left," she said softly. "Got a roommate, tried to make it work, but..." She stopped. I could have finished her sentence. The same mistakes, different faces. But this wasn't my courtroom anymore. "Lindsay," I said, my voice gentler than I expected, "you don't owe me an apology." Her eyes lifted, wet and uncertain. "I owed you respect," she said. I shook my head. "You owed yourself that first." She swallowed hard, then smiled. A small, broken thing that almost reached her eyes. "I heard about the piano," she said. "That was kind." "Evelyn's piano," I corrected. "She believed everything deserved a second chance, even people." We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then I stepped back, letting the counselor return, and carried the file boxes down the hall. When I looked back, Lindsay was still watching me, her face unreadable, but her posture, it wasn't pride anymore. It was humility. Outside, the wind was soft, carrying the faint sound of church bells from somewhere downtown. I walked to my truck, sat for a minute, and smiled. Not the bitter smile of victory, but the kind that comes when a story finishes exactly the way it should, quietly, without applause. Before driving off, I whispered the words I'd once told Evelyn by the piano. "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." And for the first time, I finally understood what that meant.